moved to South Lake Tahoe 28 years ago, looking to start again. I was 24 years old. 6 years before that, I sat on the edge of a hospital bed holding my mother's hand, telling her that I loved her for the last time. She died in the midst of a long divorce, and needless to say, when I arrived in South Lake, I was looking to hit the reset button on my life, big time. And it was here I would begin to heal by immersing myself amid the wilderness, the rocks and the water and the trees. And it was here I would find others who would help me to heal. Others who, like me, reveled in being in the outdoors, drinking clean water, breathing fresh air, and occasionally downing a half jar of peanut butter in one shot. But I'm not here tonight to talk to you about bears. I'm here to talk to you about something that all of us here would probably rather avoid. Something that society in general has gotten better and better and better at avoiding. And that something is pain. And while I'd never suggest that you go out and seek pain on its own, unless that's what you're into, I would say this: pain is an inevitable part of life. It's something that we need. It's necessary in order to change, in order to grow, and in order to love. And so I'm here tonight to suggest a simple and yet counterintuitive idea. And that is this: that if we are able to sit with legitimate pain, if we're able to feel that pain fully, there is always a gift waiting on the other side. For me, that gift began last winter. On a cool winter day, as I strapped on my running shoes and descended into Emerald Bay. Moving in quiet huffs amid the forests and the ferns, I knew exactly where I was going, but deep inside, I was lost. Eventually, I made my way to my destination at the edge of the boat camp pier. And it was there that I took a moment to ponder over the impossible blue before me. I then reached in my pocket and I pulled out a ring. Its tiny circumference measured to the size of a wedding finger. And then, once again, I felt her presence. There wasn't a trail that surrounded me at that moment that we hadn't run. And in my mind's eye, I could see her running wild, running free. At first, I pictured her running beside me, and then into the arms of another man. And so I stretched my arm back and I hurled that metal as far as it would go. The tears came quickly and honestly. As I turned my attention towards the sky, I know there would be pain, I said. All I ask is that you allow me to transform it into something positive. A month of sleepless nights followed, and that pain came like a tsunami, hurling me right back to that broken boy who had arrived 28 years ago. I felt unlovable and full of shame, as if a part of me had died. The pain that you're feeling right now, my therapist told me, is equivalent to the depth to which you love, Rick. Relationships are like ropes, she said. They're not severed overnight. They're unraveled moment by moment, one strand at a time. And so it was, I continued my unraveling through those winter nights until one night there was a voice that came from within, a wiser voice, and it asked, "When did you feel most truly alive?" Immediately I saw myself on a bicycle in a faraway land, volunteering where I could, doing the work of my heart. It was a memory from my 26,000-mile bicycle journey around the world. The realization of a life's dream. It was something in that memory like the cracking of a door letting in the light. And within that light, hope. And that exact night, I enacted a plan. Within 3 weeks, I was presenting to over 800 elementary school students at Bijou Elementary, Tahoe Valley, and the Magnet School out in Myers. Yeah. Can anybody tell me what the word empathy means? I asked them. I think, doesn't that mean when you help someone else, a little girl said? I said, yes. What else does it mean? Another girl said, I think it means when you try and feel what someone else feels. I said, that's exactly right. With that, I switched off the light, turned on a projector, and showed a short film depicting the plight of the 4.5 million refugees from Syria fleeing their homeland due to war. I told the kids, in a month's time, I'm going to fly to Greece. I'm going to work in a refugee camp. And I've been told there that the kids need backpacks and notepads and socks and underwear. I said, but if you're interested in joining me, I'd like all of you to create a piece of art that maybe you could put in each backpack. Art from your heart that shows your support for these kids. And so I came back 3 weeks after that. And the good people of Tahoe, the parents, the teachers, the kids, this place has got heart, baby. I had more supplies that I could even carry. A month later, I stood at the Izmir airport in Turkey. I was loading my bike box, my bike bags, $600 worth of extra baggage onto a tiny little airport cart, only to watch it tumble to the ground time and again. This was the least of my challenges. In the time that elapsed since I talked to those kids, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has signed a $3.3 billion deal with the EU, essentially trading lives for cash. The northern borders to Greece and Turkey were sealed off, and it trapped tens of thousands of asylum seekers within those countries. Worse yet, the volunteer camps, including the one I was going to volunteer at, almost overnight were transferred into Army-run detention centers. And so as I stood at this airport, I began to realize that I had no place to distribute those backpacks, no place to volunteer. I had no place to go. So I sat down and sent out a kind of desperate social media SOS. And within 5 minutes, I got a reply from a local cycling advocate. Her name was Pinar Pinzudi. It's like something from a fairy tale. She said, I can be down there in 45 minutes with my dad in his van. I can pick you up. You can stay at my house as long as you want. Now, you have to imagine I hadn't slept for 36 hours. I'm in the midst of this kind of half haze of jet lag, and I'm laying in the back of that van with all my stuff laying around me. And I remember her looking back and peeking around the seat. I did not know this woman from anyone. And she said, Rick, I have a confession to make to you. My husband and I have followed you for years. You are the reason that we decided to ride around the world. I couldn't believe my ears. Right after that, I got a second social media message from a gentleman by the name of Bara Wabe. He said, hey, I'm working with a small refugee camp just outside of Izmir in Torbali. He said, they have a small school there. Why don't we meet downtown and we can talk about it there? And so totally zombified, I still, getting off a plane after that long, I went and met him downtown, put my hand into his, and I recognized right off the bat that Bara was a man with serious eyes. Having fled his homeland of Palestine when he was little more than a kid, he was a man that knew a little something about what it was to be a refugee, and thus had an invested interest in these Syrians coming through his country at this point in time. He said to me, we aren't going to be able to fit all that stuff in a bus or a train, so I don't have a car, you're going to have to rent one. So I did, and the next morning we took off over Highway E38, over the hills of Izmir until it opened into spans of cotton and wheat. 45 minutes later, we pulled up to a large hillside farm about the size of a city block. It was swathed in entirety of tarps and slapped together dwellings. How many are here? I asked Bara as I stepped out of the car. He said about 550, 1,200 in the surrounding area. Salam alaikum, peace be with you, someone called out to us. And I looked over and there was a small irrigation pump house for the farm. A man waved us inside. He told us to sit on the floor, and as we did, my eyes adjusted to the light, and I recognized that there were 7 Syrian men sitting around me, all of whom spoke English. And so Bara began to talk in Arabic, and the word America would pop up in between the conversation, and all eyes would turn towards me. There was something about that conversation that sent my mind reeling back to a memory of a post I'd seen on social media from a man who equated Syrian refugees with a pit of snakes. I thought to myself, is this what we do as human beings? We first have to dehumanize before we begin to discriminate. I wasn't having any of that. I'd cycled around the world 26,000 miles. I'd traveled through hundreds of Muslim enclaves, including Oman and Iran, by myself as a lone American. And I got news for you. I was treated better there than any other country, Buddhist, Christian, you name it. These people were no different. Every one of them was kind and gentle and engaging, and they grabbed me by the hand. And as we funneled outside, one of the gentlemen grabbed me by the arm, and he pulled me close, and he looked me in the eye. He struggled with his English, and he said, "I am teacher. Thank you." As I came back home after that, I knew I would face opposition. Perhaps the most disturbing for me was the apathy. I sat and had a beer in a bar, and an acquaintance pulled me aside, and he said, "You know that thing you did by distributing 150 backpacks to those kids out there? That was meaningless. I wish that man had been with me right here at this moment. I wish he'd registered in his head and in his heart that there are currently 2.8 million Syrian children out of school since the beginning of this war. They're quickly falling behind in their education and quickly falling prey to crime, to prostitution, and worse yet, poverty and Islamic terrorism." That teacher called out. The kids came like a Pied Piper to this school in the middle of this farm. And I began to watch from afar as he lined them up and he began handing those backpacks out. And instantly I began to weep. Not because the kids of Tahoe had sent some material items to the kids overseas, but because the kids of Tahoe had sent the one thing that these children needed the most. And that something was hope. We almost left almost as soon as we arrived, and as I drove away with that car with Bara, I looked out the back window at those children shrinking in the distance, and I tried to push back in my mind the number 12,000. That's the amount of kids that have died since the beginning of this war. Having left that baggage behind, so to speak, I got on my bike and I did what I do best. I traveled 11 hours north by ferry and then 150 miles on the ancient Greek highway from Kavala into a little tiny town called Polycastro, someplace you'd only stop if you got a flat tire, basically. And so near Polycastro was the Park Hotel. I followed directions there. It was the headquarters for the biggest refugee camp in all of Greece, in all of Europe, Idomeni. I walked through the front doors of this place, and there were hundreds of volunteers. It was standing room only. There were teachers and doctors and lawyers and musicians and clowns, and there were people passed out on the floor. And of course, there were 2 elderly Greek gentlemen sipping ouzo. It was 8 a.m. I walked up to the front desk clerk, and this guy was absolutely frazzled. I mean, fried. This crisis had been an enormous pressure on the local municipalities, whichever place it was at. And I said, "Do you have a room?" And he looked at me like, if I could kill you with my eyes right now, I would do it with ease. I said, "I heard you have camping." He said, "Out back, give me €1." And so I pitched my tent among about 3 dozen other tents. And I had noticed on the way out there was like an outdoor kitchen out there. And so I approached it and found out it was an outfit called Hot Food Idomeni, started by a group of pirate-like volunteers who started up in a place called the Jungle in Calais, France. It's a small refugee camp. they decided to come down to Edomani to help out there. And the point I'd like to make here is that they started with like 1, 2 guys who started with a single pot of lentils, a single pot and a single burner. And they were now churning out 2,500 meals a day. So when I hear people say, well, you know what, I've watched this thing and I don't really know what I can do. Imagine if this guy said that, or the other guys said that. So I slipped my hand to the kitchen manager, Barry Fallon, and I said, he was a total no-bullshit Brit, and I was like, hey, what can I do to get started? He handed me a knife, and he pointed to a pile of potatoes the size of a Volkswagen. He said, when you're done with that, you can start on the onions. It was his equal size. And so I began to chop 2, 3, 4 hours, literally till my hand was bleeding. And in the middle of the day, suddenly Lilou, the girl from France, turned up the music, and I watched as these self-starting volunteers who had come on their own accord, seeing a need, began to dance. There were Swedes, Swiss, Spanish, Italian, Luxembourg, wherever that is, people from everywhere, Germany, France. They cut vegetables and they danced and cut vegetables. And just when I thought it couldn't get any better, the sky opened and it began to pour. I mean, just and so everybody scrambled and went under the awning of the Park Hotel. Everybody except for one man, of course, the lone Italian, who thought it would be great to just strip to his underwear and start streaking around the parking lot to the mad roars of the rest of the volunteers. I recognized at this moment that I had found my tribe. We're going to need you at distribution today, Barry said at the end of the day. And I'm like, dude, I just got here on my bike. I don't even know what I'm doing. He said, just get in the car. We'll figure it out when we get there. We drove 20 minutes to the border of Macedonia. We got shaken down by the cops, checked our passports. I stepped inside the largest refugee camp in all of Europe. It was filled with 10,000 people, Syrians, Afghans, Pakistanis, Kurds, Iranians, and more. When I stepped out of that car, I began to witness pain on a level that I couldn't comprehend. It was an entire city of multicolored nylon. There was filth and squalor everywhere. There were overflowing toilets. There were elderly men and women shivering under wet, muddy blankets in tents. There were women trying to cook in the rain on wooden fires. There were children scratching at lice and scabies, falling under the weight of their stares. I watched these refugees do the only thing that they could do. They waited. They waited for food. They waited for water. They waited for medical attention. They waited for the borders to open. But most of all, they waited for all of us to care. Let's do this, Barry said, and he threw open the canvas on the back of the truck, and I was on the front line handing out food. 5, 10, 15, 20, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 meals. They kept coming. These weren't just refugees. These were human beings. These were teachers. These were formerly doctors. These were formerly lawyers. People who had come with only the shirts left on their backs. When we were done handing out the food, all that was left were the children, some of whom had no parents. And there was one little boy that would show up every day at distribution. He never ate a thing. They called him Joanne. Don't ask me why. I think it was Joanne. And instead of seeking food every day, he sought another type of sustenance. He would walk around to all the volunteers and simply hold out his arms. And they would oblige. I would see him every day I was there, up until the point that I served 15,000 meals. And on one of my last days that I was there, I saw Joanne, less than 10 feet away from me. And I called out to him, Joanne. And he ignored me like kids do, so I called louder, Joanne, Joanne. And a woman pulled me by the side. She said, stop. He can't hear you. He had his hearing blown out by a bomb. I was sickened. I was filled with anger and sorrow. And all at once I could hear the voice of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quoting Dante, who said, "The hottest places in hell are reserved for those people who in the midst of moral crisis maintain their neutrality." And if there's any words that stick from this talk tonight with any of you people here, it's this, is to look inside yourself and answer that question, am I maintaining my neutrality? And if you are, might I strongly suggest that you are one step away from taking action right now. Action that will save lives. Joanne finally noticed me, and he held his arms open, and I picked that boy up and hugged him with every molecule of my being. And I wondered for that moment, was I saving him, or was he saving me? Or perhaps, as we, as humans, since our inception, in the midst of our unique pain, perhaps we were saving each other. And in that, I recognized that I'd learned the lesson that I'd come here to learn. The children taught me. And what did they teach me? They taught me that life can take everything away from you. Your house, your home, your possessions, your country, even the one you love the most in this world. But nothing, nobody can take away the human spirit. They taught me that even in the midst of life's inevitable pain, we have the choice every day, moment by moment, to keep our hearts open. To know instinctively that love is all around us, if only we're open to receive it. That is what these children taught me. That was the gift of my pain. I will leave you with one more gift before I leave. And those are the words from a man, one of the most influential men in my life, an acquaintance who I like to call a friend, a man who lived here in Lake Tahoe, the late Dr. Leo Biscaglia, who said, "I've learned that love is the most powerful force available to us. If we have real love, we have the strength to perform miracles." Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.